Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UTS Defender and watched the sleek alien ships fly past his window. The human destroyer was 40 years old and everyone in the galaxy thought it was junk. Its thick metal walls and old engines looked ugly, next to the shiny new ships that other species flew. The aliens had energy shields that glowed blue and purple, while the Defender had thick steel plates welded together like an old tank. Jake ran his hand along the metal rail on his command chair. The ship had been built when humans first started traveling between stars, and back then they built things to last. Every system had a backup, and every backup had another backup. The other species called it wasteful, but Jake called it smart. When something broke in space, you could not call for help and wait for a repair shop. Commander Lisa Barnes walked up to him with a datapad in her hands. She was his second in command and had been with him for 5 years. Lisa was young and smart, and could have served on any of the new human ships, but she chose to stay on the Defender. She said she liked ships that did not break down every week. "We got our new orders, Captain," Lisa said as she handed him the pad. "Another escort mission to the Outer Rim. They want us to watch over some cargo ships while they deliver supplies to mining colonies." Jake read the orders and shook his head. The Galactic Council gave all the important missions to the alien ships with their fancy technology. Humans got stuck with the boring jobs that nobody else wanted. The Council thought human ships were too slow and too old to handle real military work. "At least we will get to see some new systems," Jake said, trying to sound positive. "Maybe we will find something interesting out there." The crew of the Defender was 200 humans who had chosen to serve on an old ship instead of the newer vessels. Most of them had been offered transfers to modern destroyers with quantum computers and energy weapons, but they had all said no. They liked working with systems they could understand and fix with their own hands. Down in the engine room, Chief Engineer Tony Martinez was checking the chemical backup thrusters. Tony had been an engineer for 20 years and had worked on every type of human ship. He always said the old ships were the best ships because you could fix them with basic tools and spare parts. The new ships needed special equipment and computer programs just to change a light bulb. "These aliens think we are stupid," Tony said to his assistant Kate Sullivan as they worked on the engine. "They have ships that can travel faster than light in seconds while we take hours to make the same jump. They think speed is everything, but they do not understand that their ships break down if you look at them wrong." Kate nodded as she handed Tony a wrench. She was fresh out of engineering school where they taught students about the latest alien technology. But working on the Defender had taught her that sometimes the old ways were better. When systems were simple, they were reliable, and when they were reliable, you could count on them when your life depended on it. The Defender had mechanical controls for everything important. The weapons could be fired manually if the computers failed. The engines could be started with physical switches. The life support system had manual valves that could be turned by hand. Other species laughed at these backup systems and called them primitive, but the human crew knew they were the reason their ship never got stranded in space. A few days later, the Defender docked at Nexus Station, which was the main hub for the Galactic Council. The station was huge and filled with ships from dozens of different species. The Zephyrians had crystal ships that looked like floating diamonds. The Vortani flew living ships that were grown instead of built. The Kalari had ships that could disappear and reappear anywhere they wanted. Admiral Chen Rodriguez was at the station for a meeting with the alien fleet commanders. Chen was in charge of all human military ships and had to defend their design choices to species who thought humans were backward. The meeting was held in a large room with representatives from every major species in the council. "Your ships are built like fortresses," said Admiral Threx, who commanded the Kalari fleet. "They are heavy and slow and use too much fuel. Modern warfare requires speed and efficiency, not thick armor and redundant systems." The other aliens nodded in agreement. They all flew ships that were marvels of advanced technology. Their vessels could jump across the galaxy in minutes, and their weapons could destroy entire fleets with single shots. They saw human ships as relics from a more primitive time. "Human ships may be slower," Admiral Rodriguez replied, "but they are reliable. Our crews know that when they press a button, something will happen." "Can your crews say the same thing about their quantum computers and energy systems?" The aliens laughed at this comment. Their technology was so advanced that system failures were almost impossible. Their computers could predict problems before they happened, and their self-repair systems could fix damage automatically. They thought the idea of manual backups was absurd. Back on the Defender, the crew continued their daily routines. They maintained systems that other species had abandoned decades ago. The ship carried physical ammunition instead of energy charges. It used radar and sonar instead of quantum sensors. The medical bay had manual surgical tools alongside the automated equipment. Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker ran combat drills with the weapons crew. Steve had served on both old and new ships, and he preferred the old ones. When he fired the Defender's railguns, he knew exactly where the shot would go. The new energy weapons were more powerful, but they depended on computer targeting that could be jammed or hacked. Dr. Rachel Turner worked in the science lab studying reports from the Outer Rim. Rachel was a xenobiologist who specialized in alien technology, but she had requested assignment to the Defender because she wanted to work with equipment she could trust. Her instruments were simple but accurate, and they never gave false readings because of software glitches. The crew did not know that their old-fashioned ship would soon become the most important vessel in the galaxy. They did not know that an enemy was coming, who had weapons designed to destroy the advanced technology that other species relied on. They just knew that they served on a ship that worked, and that was enough for them. As the Defender prepared to leave Nexus Station for another routine patrol mission, the crew felt proud of their old ship. Other species might laugh at their primitive technology, but they knew that when things went wrong, they would be ready. The ship they called outdated was about to prove that sometimes the old ways were the best ways. The alarm bells rang throughout Nexus Station at 3 a.m. when the distress signal arrived. Captain Jake Morrison was sleeping in his quarters when Commander Lisa Barnes knocked on his door. She looked worried and held a communication device in her hand. "Captain, we need you on the bridge right now," Lisa said. "We just received an emergency transmission from Haven's End mining colony." Jake put on his uniform quickly and followed Lisa to the bridge. The crew was already at their stations and everyone looked confused. Communications Officer Andy Mitchell was trying to clean up the static-filled message that kept repeating from the speakers. "Something's coming," the voice said through the crackling interference. "Ships like nothing we've seen before. They're not responding to any of our signals. The defense platforms are offline and we can't contact the patrol ships." The message cut off suddenly and Andy could not get it back. He tried calling Haven's End on every frequency, but got only empty static. The colony was located on the edge of Council space where several species worked together to mine rare metals from asteroid fields. Director Paul Johnson had been running Haven's End for 10 years and was known for staying calm during emergencies. If Paul was scared enough to send a panic signal, then something very bad was happening. The colony had modern defense systems and was protected by a small fleet of Kalari and Zephyrian patrol ships. Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker pulled up the tactical display showing the last known positions of ships near Haven's End. There were 3 Kalari stealth frigates and 2 Zephyrian energy cruisers in the area, along with numerous civilian vessels. All of them had stopped transmitting at approximately the same time. "Sir, the automated emergency beacons are still working," Steve reported. "But they're only sending basic location data. Everything else has been cut off." Dr. Rachel Turner studied the beacon signals on her science station. The beacons were simple devices that broadcast continuously unless they were physically destroyed. The fact that they were still working meant that whatever attacked Haven's End had not completely obliterated everything. "This is strange," Rachel said as she analyzed the data. "The attack seems to have been very selective. Some systems were destroyed while others were left completely untouched. It's like someone knew exactly what to target." Admiral Chen Rodriguez arrived at Nexus Station 6 hours later aboard his flagship. He called an emergency meeting with all available ship captains, and Jake found himself sitting next to alien commanders who usually ignored him. The mood in the room was tense because no one understood what had happened at Haven's End. "We've lost contact with an entire sector," Admiral Rodriguez announced. 5 military vessels, dozens of civilian ships, and a major mining operation have all gone silent. The last automated messages suggest they were attacked by unknown forces. The alien commanders began discussing response plans. Admiral Threx wanted to send a full Kalari battle group to investigate. The Zephyrian fleet commanders suggested using their fastest scouts to gather intelligence. The Vortani representative recommended deploying their bioships, which could adapt to any threat. Jake listened to the discussion and noticed something important. All of the alien plans involved using their most advanced technology. They wanted to send ships with the best sensors, the fastest engines, and the most powerful weapons. No one was considering that their advanced systems might be the problem. What if their technology is specifically designed to counter our modern ships, Jake suggested. Maybe we should send something they won't expect. The alien commanders looked at him with expressions that ranged from confusion to mild annoyance. The idea that primitive human technology might be useful seemed ridiculous to them. Their ships could do things that human vessels could not even attempt. Captain Morrison. Admiral Threx replied in a condescending tone. Whatever destroyed our patrol ships would make quick work of your outdated destroyer. This situation requires the most advanced vessels we have available. The meeting ended with plans to send a mixed fleet of alien ships to investigate Haven's End. The humans were assigned to patrol the inner systems and protect civilian populations. Once again, they were given the boring defensive missions while the aliens handled the real military work. Over the next few days, more reports came in from across the galaxy. Other colonies and outposts were going silent, with the same pattern of selective destruction. The attackers seemed to know exactly how to disable modern ships and defense systems while leaving primitive equipment untouched. The enemy became known as Sypher-8 after a garbled transmission from a dying Zephyrian captain who tried to warn other ships about the threat. Intelligence reports suggested that Sypher-8 used weapons and tactics that were completely unknown to any council species. Dr. Turner spent her time analyzing the scattered data that managed to reach Nexus Station. The attacking ships appeared to use some kind of disruption technology that interfered with energy shields and quantum computers. Their weapons seemed designed specifically to exploit the weaknesses of advanced systems. Look at this pattern. Rachel showed Jake and Lisa on her computer screen. Every ship that was attacked had the same types of failures. Energy shields collapsed first, then quantum drives went offline, and finally life support systems shut down. But the basic mechanical systems kept working. The implications were disturbing. If an enemy had developed weapons that could neutralize modern technology, then the entire Galactic Council fleet was vulnerable. Ships that had seemed invincible just days ago were now revealed to be helpless against the right kind of attack. News arrived that Admiral Threx's investigation fleet had found the Haven's End system. All of the modern ships were drifting powerless in space with their crews in emergency stasis pods. The Kalari stealth frigates had been detected and disabled before they could use their cloaking systems. The Zephyrian energy cruisers had lost all power when their quantum cores were somehow shut down. The crews are alive, but their ships are completely dead, Admiral Rodriguez announced to the emergency council session. Every advanced system has been disabled, but the basic life support is still functioning. It's like someone knew exactly which components to target. The alien commanders began to realize that their technological superiority might actually be a weakness. Ships that relied entirely on advanced systems had no way to function when those systems were attacked. The redundant mechanical backups that humans insisted on using suddenly seemed much more valuable. Jake looked around the room and saw fear in the eyes of beings who had never doubted their technological supremacy. For the first time in galactic history, the most advanced ships were the most vulnerable targets. The threat was coming closer to the core systems, and no one knew how to stop it. The Sypher-8 fleet arrived at the edge of Council space 3 weeks after the first attacks. Long-range sensors detected 47 enemy ships moving in perfect formation toward the core systems. They traveled at sublight speed, which meant they would reach populated worlds in just a few days. Admiral Rodriguez assembled the largest fleet in galactic history to meet this threat. 200 ships from 12 different species gathered at the Horizon defense line. The Kalari brought their newest stealth destroyers that could appear and disappear at will. The Zephyrians deployed energy dreadnoughts with weapons that could crack planets. The Vortani sent biocruisers that could heal themselves during battle. Captain Jake Morrison watched the massive alien fleet prepare for combat from the bridge of the Defender. His old ship looked tiny compared to the sleek vessels around him. The human contingent consisted of only 15 destroyers and cruisers, all of them at least 30 years old. The Council had positioned them in the rear to provide support and rescue operations. "All ships report ready for engagement," came the voice of Fleet Admiral Keth Vor, a Zephyrian who commanded the combined forces. "Enemy contact in 2 hours. All vessels charge energy shields and prepare quantum drives for tactical jumps." The alien ships began to glow as their advanced systems powered up. Energy shields created shimmering barriers around each vessel, while quantum computers calculated millions of firing solutions per second. The display was impressive, and everyone felt confident that no enemy could stand against such overwhelming technological superiority. Commander Lisa Barnes stood next to Jake as they watched the preparations. The Defender's crew was running their own checks, but their procedures looked primitive compared to what the aliens were doing. Instead of energy shields, they had thick armor plates. Instead of quantum computers, they had mechanical targeting systems. "Sir, should we power up our backup systems?" Lisa asked. "Maybe we should have everything ready just in case." Jake nodded and gave the order to bring all systems online. Chief Engineer Tony Martinez began starting the chemical backup thrusters, even though they probably would not be needed. Communications Officer Andy Mitchell checked the old radio equipment that the ship carried for emergencies. Weapons Officer Betty Clark loaded physical ammunition into the railgun magazines. The Sypher-8 ships appeared on long-range sensors exactly when predicted. They were dark and angular with no lights or energy signatures visible. The alien fleet immediately began forming attack formations while their computers analyzed the enemy vessels for weaknesses. "Beginning attack run," Admiral Keth Vore announced. "All ships engage at maximum range with energy weapons." The first salvo was spectacular. Hundreds of energy beams lanced out toward the Sypher-8 fleet, while quantum torpedoes streaked through space. The alien crews expected to see enemy ships destroyed instantly by the overwhelming firepower. Instead, something impossible happened. Every energy weapon simply stopped working. The beams flickered and died while the torpedoes tumbled out of control as their guidance systems failed. Across the entire fleet, energy shields began collapsing, and quantum drives shut down without warning. Within minutes, the most advanced military force in galactic history was drifting helplessly in space. "What's happening?" Admiral Keth Vore's voice crackled over the emergency radio frequencies. "All ships report status immediately." The reports that came back were terrifying. Every advanced system on every alien ship had been disabled by some kind of field or weapon that the Sypher-8 vessels were projecting. Ships that had seemed invincible were now floating hulks with crews trapped inside failing life support systems. Jake stared at his instruments in amazement. The Defender's systems were all working perfectly. Their mechanical controls responded normally, and their simple computers showed no signs of interference. Whatever the Sypher-8 ships were doing to disable advanced technology had no effect on primitive human equipment. "Captain, we're receiving new orders," Andy Mitchell announced. "Admiral Rodriguez is ordering all human ships to engage the enemy immediately." Jake could not believe what he was hearing. The most powerful alien fleet ever assembled had been neutralized in minutes, and now the humans were being asked to fight alone with their outdated ships. It seemed like suicide, but Jake knew they had no choice. "All stations prepare for combat," Jake announced over the ship's intercom. "This is what we trained for people. Let's show these aliens what human engineering can do." The 15 human ships moved forward, while the disabled alien vessels drifted behind them. The Sypher-8 fleet turned to face this new threat, but their weapons seemed confused by the approaching ships. Energy disruptors that had easily disabled quantum systems found nothing to disrupt on the human vessels. Dr. Rachel Turner monitored the enemy's scanning attempts from her science station. The Sypher-8 ships were trying to target the humans' advanced systems, but they could not find any. The human ships used such basic technology that the enemy weapons had nothing to lock onto. "They're designed to fight modern ships," Rachel announced excitedly. "Their weapons specifically target quantum computers and energy systems. But our ships don't have quantum computers, and our weapons are purely mechanical." The first human railgun shots took the Sypher-8 fleet completely by surprise. The enemy had shields that could stop energy weapons, but simple kinetic projectiles punched right through them. Physical ammunition guided by basic targeting systems struck enemy hulls, while their countermeasures tried uselessly to jam computers that did not exist. Tony Martinez watched his engine readings with satisfaction as the Defender closed distance with the enemy. The chemical thrusters that aliens mocked as primitive were pushing the ship forward, while Sypher-8 weapons tried to disable systems that were too simple to hack. Their quantum viruses can't infect a mechanical switch. Tony laughed as he manually adjusted power flow to the weapons, and their energy disruptors can't stop a chemical reaction. The battle turned into a one-sided massacre as human ships tore through the Sypher-8 formation. Enemy vessels that had easily defeated the most advanced alien technology found themselves helpless against weapons that would have been familiar to humans from centuries ago. Railguns fired solid projectiles, while chemical rockets delivered explosive warheads. Steve Parker coordinated the attack using voice communication and hand signals. When the enemy managed to jam some electronic systems, the human crews adapted quickly to manual fire control, while Sypher-8 ships struggled to understand how they were being defeated by such primitive opponents. Within an hour, 12 enemy ships had been destroyed, and the rest were retreating. The human fleet had suffered minor damage but no losses, while the alien ships remained powerless. For the first time in galactic history, human technology had proven superior to the most advanced systems available. The Sypher-8 flagship was 3 times larger than any ship in the human fleet, and it moved forward like a metal mountain through space. The massive vessel had watched its escort ships get destroyed by primitive human weapons, and now it wanted revenge. Captain Jake Morrison could see weapon ports opening along its dark hull as it prepared to engage the Defender directly. "That's the biggest ship I've ever seen," Commander Lisa Barnes said as she studied the tactical display. "Our railguns might not be able to penetrate armor that thick." The flagship was covered in layers of metal plates that looked almost as heavy as the armor on human ships. But Jake noticed something important about the enemy vessel. Its weapons were all designed for fighting modern ships with energy shields and quantum drives. The massive guns that had easily disabled alien fleets might not work as well against simple human technology. "All ships maintain distance and keep firing," Jake ordered over the radio. "Don't let that thing get close enough to use its main weapons." The other human ships spread out in a wide formation around the enemy flagship. Their railguns kept firing solid projectiles that struck the massive hull, but seemed to do little damage. The ship was simply too big and too heavily armored for conventional weapons to hurt it seriously. Chief Engineer Tony Martinez was working frantically in the engine room to keep power flowing to the weapons. The Defender's old systems were being pushed to their limits, and several components had already failed from the stress. But the mechanical backups kept everything running even when the main systems broke down. "We're losing power to the port railgun," Tony reported over the intercom. "I can reroute through the backup cables, but it will take 5 minutes." Jake knew they did not have 5 minutes. The enemy flagship was closing distance rapidly, and its massive weapons were starting to track the human ships. When those guns fired, they would probably destroy everything in their path, regardless of what kind of technology the targets used. Dr. Rachel Turner was analyzing the enemy ship's structure from her science station. The massive vessel seemed to be built around a central core that housed its main power systems. If they could somehow reach that core, they might be able to disable the entire ship. "Captain, I think I found a weakness," Rachel announced. "The flagship has heavy armor everywhere except near the engine section. There's a gap in the plating where the drive systems connect to the main hull." Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker immediately began calculating a firing solution for that weak spot. But the gap was small and located on the ship's rear section. They would need to get behind the flagship to hit it, and that meant flying directly into its main weapons. "We'll never survive a head-on attack," Steve reported. "Their forward guns are too powerful and we don't have enough speed to outrun them." Jake stared at the enemy ship and realized there was only one way to win this fight. The Defender would have to get close enough to use its most primitive weapon system. Every human ship carried emergency ramming equipment for use against asteroids and space debris. It was not designed for combat, but it might work against an enemy that expected to fight with energy weapons. "All ships, this is the Defender," Jake announced on the fleet channel. "We're going to ram that flagship. Continue firing to keep their attention while we make our approach." The other human captains thought Jake had lost his mind. Ramming attacks had not been used in space combat for hundreds of years because modern ships were too fragile to survive the impact. But the Defender was built like an old-fashioned battleship with thick armor and strong internal supports. Communications. Officer Andy Mitchell tried to contact the disabled alien ships to warn them about the ramming attack. Most of the alien vessels were still powerless, but their crews were alive in emergency shelters. If the human plan failed, then everyone in the system would be defenseless against the Sypher-8 flagship. "Admiral Rodriguez, this is the Defender," Andy called on the emergency frequency. "We are beginning final attack run on the enemy flagship. If we fail, you need to evacuate the core systems immediately." The Defender turned toward the massive enemy ship and began accelerating on its chemical thrusters. The flagship's weapons tried to track the approaching human vessel, but their targeting systems were designed for fighting ships that moved in predictable patterns. The Defender's erratic course confused the automated gun controls. Tony Martinez was pumping every bit of power into the engines while shutting down non-essential systems throughout the ship. The lights dimmed as electricity flowed to the thrusters, and the artificial gravity fluctuated as power was redirected. But the ship kept moving forward even as enemy weapons began hitting its armor. Hull breach on Deck 7, Weapons Officer Betty Clark reported. Damage control teams are sealing the compartment. The Defender's thick armor absorbed hit after hit from the enemy's massive guns. Plates of steel cracked and bent but did not break completely. The ship's redundant hull design kept it intact, even as whole sections were damaged by the bombardment. Jake could see the enemy flagship growing larger in the main screen as they approached. The massive ship was trying to turn away from the ramming attack, but it was too big and slow to escape. Its weapons kept firing, but most of the shots missed as the gunners struggled to hit such a small, fast target. Impact in 30 seconds, Steve announced from his tactical station. All hands brace for collision. The crew grabbed onto anything solid as the Defender lined up for its final approach. Jake had ordered everyone to put on emergency suits in case the hull was breached during impact. The ship's medical bay was prepared for casualties and all non-essential personnel were secured in the safest compartments. 10 seconds to impact, Steve called out. 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1, impact. The collision shook the entire ship like an earthquake. Jake was thrown against his command chair while Lisa crashed into the navigation station. Emergency lights activated as the main power systems went offline, and alarms rang throughout the vessel. But the Defender's strong construction held together through the massive impact. The enemy flagship was not so lucky. The human ship had struck it directly amidships where the armor was thinnest. The impact had torn a huge hole in the alien vessel's hull, and secondary explosions were visible through the breach. The massive ship began breaking apart as its internal structure failed. Enemy flagship is breaking up, Andy Mitchell reported as he got back to his communication station. We did it, Captain. The flagship is destroyed. Jake looked at the tactical display and saw debris spreading outward from where the enemy ship had been. The Defender had survived the ramming attack with heavy damage, but the crew was alive, and the ship was still functional. They had destroyed the most powerful vessel in the Sypher-8 fleet using nothing but thick armor and chemical thrusters. 6 months after the battle against the Sypher-8 fleet, everything had changed in the galaxy. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his repaired ship and watched construction. Crews working on the new defense platforms around Earth. The platforms looked different from the old ones because they were built using human engineering principles instead of advanced alien technology. The Galactic Council had called an emergency session to discuss the lessons learned from the Sypher-8 attacks. For the first time in history, human representatives were given positions of authority in military planning committees. Admiral Chen Rodriguez had been promoted to Supreme Defense Coordinator and was now in charge of protecting the entire galaxy. Commander Lisa Barnes had received her own ship command aboard one of the new hybrid vessels that combined human reliability with alien innovation. The ship used mechanical backup systems for everything important while keeping some of the useful alien technologies that did not depend on quantum computers or energy fields. It's strange seeing all these changes, Lisa said as she visited Jake on the Defender. 6 months ago they called us primitive, and now they're copying everything we do. The alien species had completely changed their approach to military technology after seeing their most advanced ships disabled so easily. The Kalari were retrofitting their stealth frigates with mechanical controls and physical ammunition storage. The Zephyrians had started building ships with thick armor, instead of relying only on energy. Shields. Chief Engineer Tony Martinez was busier than ever because every alien species wanted to learn about human engineering. He spent half his time teaching classes to alien engineers who had never seen a mechanical switch or a chemical thruster. The concepts that humans took for granted were revolutionary to species that had used only advanced technology for thousands of years. They keep asking me why we build so many backup systems, Tony explained to Dr. Rachel Turner during one of their conversations. I tell them it's because things break, and when they break, you need another way to do the job. But some of them still don't understand. Rachel had been promoted to head of the new Technological Assessment Division, which studied captured alien equipment to understand how it worked. The Sypher-8 ships had been built by refugees from a war with artificial intelligence machines. Their weapons were designed specifically to fight enemies that used advanced computer systems. The Sypher-8 people came from a galaxy where machines had taken over, Rachel explained to the council during one of her briefings. They built their ships to fight artificial intelligence by disrupting computer systems and energy fields. When they encountered our galaxy, they assumed all ships would be vulnerable to the same tactics. The revelation that the Sypher-8 were refugees, rather than conquerors, had changed how the council dealt with the remaining enemy ships. Instead of destroying them, they had captured several vessels and opened negotiations with the survivors. The aliens were amazed to learn that organic beings could build technology without depending entirely on computers. Lieutenant Commander Steve Parker was now training mixed crews of humans and aliens on the new combat doctrine. The old strategy of relying on superior technology had been replaced with tactics that emphasized redundancy and adaptability. Ships carried both energy weapons and physical ammunition, so they could fight regardless of what countermeasures the enemy used. The key is having options. Steve taught his students during combat simulations. If your energy weapons don't work, you use kinetic weapons. If your quantum computer fails, you use mechanical targeting. Always have a backup plan for your backup plan. The new military philosophy spread beyond just ship design. Space stations began installing manual controls alongside their automated systems. Communications networks added old-fashioned radio equipment to supplement their quantum transmitters. Even civilian vessels started carrying basic tools and spare parts. Instead of relying entirely on self-repair, systems. Admiral Rodriguez found himself in the unusual position of being the most respected military leader in the galaxy. Alien species that had once dismissed human tactics were now begging for advice on how to build reliable defensive systems. The Admiral had to be careful not to let the sudden attention go to his head. "We're not superior to other species," Rodriguez reminded his staff during planning meetings. "We just happen to use technology that the enemy wasn't prepared for. If we get arrogant, we'll make the same mistakes that the aliens made before the attacks." The Defender became a symbol of the new military approach and was designated as the flagship of the Galactic Defense Force. Jake found himself promoted to Commodore and given command of an entire fleet of ships built using human engineering principles. The old destroyer that everyone had called obsolete was now the most famous vessel in known space. Jake often walked through the corridors of his ship and remembered how different things had been just a few months earlier. The crew members who had stayed with the Defender when they could have transferred to newer ships were now considered heroes. Their loyalty to old-fashioned reliability had saved the galaxy from an enemy that no one had seen coming. The shipyards around Earth were working constantly to build the new generation of warships. The vessels looked like enlarged versions of the Defender, with thick armor plating and redundant mechanical systems. They carried both human and alien crew members who worked together to operate equipment that combined the best features of different technologies. Dr. Turner's research had revealed that the galaxy was full of potential threats similar to the Sypher-8. Ancient machine civilizations, rogue artificial intelligences, and energy-based life forms all posed dangers to ships that relied too heavily on advanced systems. The new mixed technology approach would be better prepared for whatever enemies appeared in the future. "Diversity is strength," Rachel explained in her final report to the Council. "Species that use different approaches to technology are harder for enemies to counter. If we all use the same systems, then one attack could disable our entire fleet." The Sypher-8 survivors had been given sanctuary on a remote world where they were sharing their knowledge about the machine wars in their home galaxy. Some of their defensive technologies were being adapted for use by Council ships, while their warnings about artificial intelligence were being taken seriously by computer researchers. Jake stood on the bridge of the Defender and looked out at the stars where new threats might be waiting. The ship that had been called outdated was still flying and still protecting the galaxy. Its mechanical systems continued working reliably while newer vessels came and went. The old destroyer had proven that sometimes the best technology was the one that simply worked when everything else failed. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about the dangers of depending too heavily on advanced systems. Ships that seemed invincible could become helpless when faced with the right kind of attack. But vessels built with redundant mechanical backups would keep fighting even when their computers failed and their energy systems were disrupted. The Defender sailed on through space, carrying the knowledge that had saved civilization and the crew that had made it possible.